All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining this Thetius research launch. We're really excited to be here, launching our new research on strong digital foundations that was commissioned by our friends at Sedna. I'm going to take you through the kind of usual format for our research launches today. So first things first, I'll take you through a kind of brief overview of the report and the core recommendations of the report. Then we have some fantastic experts who are going to join us to actually discuss the findings of the report and what it means for industry and what we should all be thinking about taking back into our own organizations. And of course, we want to bring you into that discussion as well. So you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom panel here, there's a little button called Q&A. If you click that button, it allows you to submit a written question. We have dedicated time for questions at the end. What always happens on our research launch webinars is we get very few questions for the first sort of 50 minutes or so, and then everyone wants to ask a question in the last 10 minutes or so when we run out of time for questions. So all I would say, encourage you is if you have a point you want to raise, a question you want to ask to one of our experts, or a question about the report, then pop it in the Q&A box down the bottom as soon as you think of it, and then when the time comes towards the end of the session, we will we'll do our best to answer as many of those questions as we can. Two questions that always come up. One is that the report is being made available to you straight away. So in about 10 minutes time, once I've kind of gone through this presentation, I just double check with everyone that I can be heard. Just one of the speakers give a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Okay, all right. So there's a question come in about my sound, but I think it might be isolated to that individual. The two questions always come up. One is, will we get a copy of the report? Yes, you will. In about 10 minutes time, you should get an email through with a copy of the report. It's about 30 pages. It's absolutely packed full of insight from interviews that we've conducted over the last few months. And it goes into much more detail about this topic than we'll have time for on this webinar. So it's well worth a read. And then the second I always get asked is, will we get a copy of the recording? And yes, you will. Tomorrow, this will go live on YouTube. So you'll be able to come back to it, reference it at your leisure. All right, well, let's jump into the topic. The whole point of this research was really to look at the foundations, the digital foundations that the maritime industry is working off. And one of the things that we've observed over the last few years in the work that we've been doing is that there has been a kind of additive approach to IT and digital transformation. We have an industry of people who are wonderful problem solvers, and they're very good at finding a way to get the job done. And often over the last sort of 5-10 years or so, that's been, if we have a problem, we'll find a piece of software that can solve it, and we'll bring that software in. And then we have another problem over here, and we bring another piece of software in. Or we find a problem and we look for a way of manually working around it to be able to just solve the problem on the day that it comes up. And through the process of the interviews that we ran, we actually found that there are all sorts of weird and wonderful examples of members of a chartering team or an operations team who are creating these kind of manual workarounds to compensate for the fact that they've got problems that their IT setup just isn't able to solve. My favorite example in the report was an interview with an operator that said they spend about half an hour every morning just deleting old emails so that there was space on the server for new ones to come in. And that's just a classic example of a kind of maritime industry workaround to a problem that stems from having this kind of additive approach to IT. That has traditionally been fine. It has allowed everyone to survive and not face any kind of major issues. But we're now moving into a phase where trust feels like it's decreasing and complexity feels like it's increasing. So when we take things like the new environmental regs, EEXI, CII, EU ETS, Fuel EU, plus the more fragmented world that we're living in, when we look at things like sanctions and compliance, the complexity of maritime operations has increased significantly, and these foundations are starting to pop. And as a result, something that was picked up on by one of the interviewees in the report was this kind of concept of shadow reporting. So you end up with kind of shadow systems. There is a report that is driven by an Excel sheet that sits on a superintendent's laptop or a charterer's laptop. And that is actually where we end up with lots of different versions of the truth, and we lose this kind of single version of the truth. So how do we fix that? How do we build a shared operational truth? It's about trying to move away from this kind of fragmented systems and fragmented, particularly communication tools acting as a system of record, where data gets locked away with either with specific vendors or on specific members of staff's own IT stations, or in specific sets of reporting that are not shared, and moving towards a kind of single trusted record for voyage data that is continuously updated and can act as a single source of truth for an organization. Another angle that we found with this, it's not an easy thing to do. A big part of that is because of something that we're calling accidental vendor lock-in, where you end up, because of this additive approach to IT, where you're bringing in individual systems and then working out how to tie them together, or bringing in workarounds, that you might end up with 3, 4, 5 different systems that don't necessarily talk to each other particularly effectively. And it's very, very difficult to remove one of those systems or change one of those systems without having other systems in your setup start to fall over. So there's this really common problem that we see across the industry where you sort of by default end up kind of locked into particular vendors. So is there a way that we can go from taking this fragmented approach to transformation, or this additive approach to transformation, to something that allows us to become much more strategic in our thinking? And we see that as building strong digital foundations. Instead of coming along and fixing a problem one by one and adding a system or creating a workaround to overcome it, taking a much more strategic look at IT and digital transformation and what the infrastructure looks like, working out where we want to go, and then finding and building out a system that enables us to grow into that. And there's some fantastic case studies in the report. One in particular that I really like, that was referenced to us from CPEAK, where they have taken that much more structured approach. And what they were able to do almost immediately was, once they started gaining structured access to this single source of truth data, was they found an opportunity to save about $2 million a year, just because they had access to better onboard generator data, and they could spot trends and then make recommendations back to the ships. So it's a huge amount of value that can be unlocked when you start to take a much more strategic approach to kind of laying out these foundations. However, this isn't about going and wholesaling, switching out one system for another. It's about really understanding the workflows that exist in the organization. How does information move? How does data move? And who owns it? So the first step that we see is actually mapping out how information is captured, how it is stored, how it is used, before you even consider what systems you might want to change. One of the things that we see really consistently at Thetius in the work that we do is that a ship owner or a charterer will come to us and say, we want to change this system. And often the first step that we have to take is to kind of go back and say, well, actually, why? Let's get to the bottom of the problems. And we often end up coming back to these kind of foundational issues, which is why I'm really excited that we're launching research on this. Step 2 is actually aligning all the stakeholders that you need, and really getting an understanding and building some clarity around data ownership across the organization, so that you end up with teams not sort of fighting over overlapping data sets. There's some really lovely anecdotal evidence in the report that we've seen, where we've had people who've interviewed with us saying that once they got this right, the clarity around data ownership, that the relationships between the chartering department and the operations department actually started to improve on an ongoing basis. And now everyone is sort of much happier as a team. There's much less infighting and kind of politics in the organization, which is a really nice thing to see, because often I think we get caught up in the sort of personal relationships of things without thinking about the systems that we're all being forced to use and what impact that might have on how we manage relationships through an organization. And then step 3 is actually phasing rollouts of new systems. Once you've taken those first 2 steps, you've got an understanding of how data moves, and you've got an understanding of who the stakeholders are and what we're all trying to get towards. Taking a much more kind of phased approach to rolling out. This is not about sort of swapping out one system for another overnight. I think that's something that's super important, and more often than not, we end up going back to when the client work we do with our clients, we end up going back to the vendors that they're already working with, and just look at ironing out some of the problems that exist rather than trying to advocate for a kind of full system switch. As with all Thetius research, there are 4 recommendations that we're making to industry. They are unpacked in a bit more detail in the report, but I'll take you through them briefly here. Number 1 is prioritizing the integrity of data. So that is moving away from data being in all sorts of different places, all sorts of different systems, even all sorts of different devices, and moving towards a single source of truth. Number 2 is that we've got this problem where inboxes often act as the system of record. You know, there's a problem with a ship. There's an email chain about how that problem is solved, various attachments to that email chain, and that effectively becomes the default system of record for the organization, when actually there are much more effective ways of managing information across the organization. Number 3, look to strengthen the foundations, these digital foundations, before you look to add intelligence. So something that we're seeing a lot at the moment is a kind of shiny object syndrome when it comes to AI. AI is hugely exciting, hugely important. I think it will have a massive, massive impact on the industry and how we work. But if you don't get these foundations fixed, you're going to end up with AI taking effectively bad data or incomplete data, and then giving you fast answers that are wrong, and often wrong and confident. And so it's really important that this foundational work, which is quite dull, but really important, is done first. And then number 4, improve what exists before trying to replace it. It's something we see all the time in the work that we do day to day, is that there is a requirement, often coming from the top of, we need to switch vendors, and actually looking at what is going on within the organization, and what are the needs of the organization. Often there are improvements that can be made to all of the existing infrastructure to make it work really effectively, and replacing it should really be a last resort when you consider the costs of all the change management and everything that goes with it. That was a very, very brief overview. As I say, the report itself is nearly 30 pages. It goes into a huge amount of detail on both the recommendations and also what we see as the core problem. And there's a huge number of people who contributed their time to it and expertise to it, through interviews as well. So I would absolutely recommend downloading it after this session and having a read through it. But I'm delighted to be able to welcome to our session here 4 people who have read it and were given an advanced copy so that we can discuss it on this session today. So first off, why don't we just have a quick rundown the panel. Bill, why don't you go first? Could you just introduce yourself and then just give us your kind of first impressions of the research?
Yeah, no, thanks for the moderating the panel today, Nick, and it's a pleasure to be here, and especially to be here with some customers. I'm the founder and CEO of Sedna. We are a system that tries to acknowledge the conversations at the center of shipping, and around that, we are building an operating system for the industry. And I think, there was a lot to take away from the from the customers. I was actually thinking of the specific example where you talked about the telemetry replacing becoming the center of truth. In the back of my mind, I thought, I wonder if they're still getting emails too about about the reporting infrastructure. But what I think is really clear is that we as a business we as an industry have to work to there's a commingling between conversation and solutioning and facts. We have to work to kind of disentangle that. And I think a lot of it is, people see email, yes, obviously we're an email company. Do we see it as the enemy? What we see it as is the fastest way to get people's attention in order to solve a problem. And so the work, I think, in digital transformation is how quickly can you pull away from the email as the place that you have the facts. And that was a big part of it. I will say that what surprised me was the not big bang approach. We probably, people even in this room, we tend to think too, you start small and build up, but there does seem to be still an industry passion. Can we fix all these things at once with one magic system or the next thing, blockchain, now it was blockchain, now it's AI or something like that. So I found that quite interesting too. So thanks very much.
Yeah, I think it is a function of the industry that often we go slower than the trends go, and sometimes they come and go before we've fully got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
grips with them.
yeah, yeah.
Joachim, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I'm Joachim. I'm been working within shipping within the industry since 2007, and always a bit on the intersection of business processes, decision making, analytics, and business applications. So always a bit in and out of an IT organization. Sometimes I work for companies, it's like on the payroll. Afterwards, a lot more as a consultant for companies. But been working with a lot of big names like Maersk, Clipper Group, Nordic Tankers, Stolt Nielsen, Wallenius Wilhelmsen, Christiania Shipping, and several others. But what I found interesting in the report is reading the fragmentation, which does not come as a surprise. There's heavily depending on spreadsheets and things like that. But I also see that as there is an explanation for it. Most shipping companies on shore are very small. And if you're 150 people, you're a big one already, especially in the bulk vendor tramp shipping industry. But a lot of the teams are even smaller. So you sometimes asking a very small team has a very specific problem. Uh, Whether that's isolated to an operations team or a vetting team or anything else. So and yeah, none of the big systems out there really solve that problem or address it in an adequate way that fits their way of using it. So then the question becomes, are you going to build something yourself, or are you going to ask a vendor to build it for you? And that's often a no-go. So what they default to is Excel spreadsheets, so or Google spreadsheets or whatever you call it. But they build up their own business process in a spreadsheet, and at some point, yeah, that gets fragmented, but it does work for it. So even with a big bang approach or a discussion with your vendors, it's like that's not gonna fly. They're not gonna address that problem. So I'm all advocating for moving away from spreadsheet, but I doubt that the solution is coming from big vendors. But we need to get that we need to get more hackers in the industry. I think that's also how Bill started, but we need to get more hackers that hack systems together, that create small platforms that can collect data in a more structural way than that it can be part of the universal for one version of the truth, and you can use that in reporting.
Yeah, will definitely want to come back to that point, because I think once those foundations are in place, I think it does unlock a lot of what you can do in an organization. And yeah, and I think that's a really, really good point. Lars?
Let's see. Hey, yeah, my name is Lars, and I work as PMO and Digital Transformation Manager here at Unitankers. We are a small chemical tanker company having around 40 vessels here of about half of them, or a little less than a half, is owned by ourselves. The rest is TC chartered ones. Actually, as Joachim mentioned, we are a big but small company with around 100 people at shore managing these vessels. My role here is to be the quarterback. Actually, it actually came from a leadership need that they needed someone to play back towards the organization to see, okay, now we have all these systems which each department have bought, but there are no synergies between them. So for us, we are on an exercise trying to get the most out of each system and like interconnect them through a digital platform. So we don't want to integrate systems with systems, but we want to integrate it down to one data lake where we actually have a single source of truth, and that is then distributed around the other systems. When I read the report, I'm really happy to see that we are apparently on the right track here to change what is actually common in shipping. And sometimes it's good to know that to be confirmed in that, actually, because that gives more wind under our shields here to actually push for more, because it's a people's business, and especially in our company we have a lot of senior people who have done this for decades, and they have actually found solutions for things for decades in spreadsheets, in workarounds, and like convincing themselves this is the nature of shipping and it cannot be different. But if you come from another decade and you come from the outside in, then you can actually see there's a lot of opportunities and stable data-driven workaround for what we do today. So for me, it's very much about to learn the organization, to see both upwise what is needed to the management and reporting, and like to keep the track and the overhead. Then also look to the sides, to the cameras right and left to you. What do they actually need, and how can we help each other? And then, of course, most important for the individual, look down and say, okay, what is your specific need here we need to solve, and how can we do it in a very good way? So we're working a lot around using like key behavioral indicators. So how do we think about data and systems and approaches? And then, of course, we look into KPIs to improve how we take our decision data. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's really interesting to hear a company taking such a structured approach to the whole organization, not just the leadership view, but also what everyone's individual needs as well. I definitely want to sort of come back and unpack that a little bit more. But before I do, Stephen, last but by no means least, please give us a bit of an intro to yourself.
I'm Stephen van Aak, work for S&T Shipping, and we are both a ship owner of a fleet of 70 vessels, and we manage our fleet ourselves. We're also a bit of the mid-sized company. We have almost 200 people on shore. So it's in the right size, I think, that you can invest also a bit more in IT and make process more efficient. I think what would resonate with me for the report, it highlights exactly the journey that we started in our company 5 years ago, and the journey will never end, I think. But it's key that you digest all the steps that you take incrementally and go to a mode of continuous improvement. But also mentioned in the report, not the big banks anymore, and that you find yourself able to define the ecosystem you want in the niche products or the big ERPs or data platforms that work seamlessly together. And I think as well that requires quite a good view on what is your system of record, what is your system of entry, and how they interact, and which one will be leading in the sharing of master data entities, and much more, which in the end will help you to make data work for you, not only as a strategic asset, but also as an operational asset. Because before it becomes strategic, you have to make it work, on day-by-day basis of the people.
Thank you, Stephen. It's really interesting hearing the journey you've been on and sort of getting to data becoming a strategic asset, and then Lars's comments about you've got people who've been in the business for decades and have found workarounds to make things work, and that's how it's been for a long time. And as a way of kind of kicking this off, Bill, I'd like to perhaps start with you. What do you think is the main kind of driver? I feel like there's a bit of a tipping point where we're moving from this kind of done for decades approach that Lars talked about to data as a strategic asset. Why do you think the industry is sort of having to make that switch today? Why now?
And actually reflecting a bit on what Stephen and Lars were saying too. I'll step back and make sort of a general statement, and then dive into the question specifically. One of the things that I've experienced over the years, and these folks probably have too, the caution in the, you can't like build a ship in a shipyard and then launch it unfinished or there, and sail it safely and effectively. So there is, I think, a mentality in shipping. You actually have a group of very creative people who want to solve problems and actually want to invent new systems and try new systems, but they are hardwired, rightfully so, for a very narrow risk tolerance because of environmental risk or human safety risk or financial risk. And so the tolerance for how much I can fail at this at first is much less than people think. And I think one of the key success criteria for digital innovation is quite a bit of failure, actually rapid failure. It's not working and then tuning and adjusting and figuring that out. And I think that's, to take it back to your question, I think what's happening now is that there are now a set of solutions, set of vendors, a set of experts inside of, I'm not sure there would have been folks like Stephen and Lars and Joachim 15 years ago that we would be dialoguing with in the small to mid-size range. There are a set of people who can coach the organization how to try some of these new approaches in what appears to be a less risky way. So for me, and I do think, for all the buzz about it, AI layers on top of this, right? You have a set of technologies and an ability to experiment with things faster that is creating that moment. On the flip side of that is just market complexity. We are having to, because of the situation in trade, rooted all the way back to the Ukraine invasion onwards. You have COVID before that. You have all these kind of re-engineered trade lanes and counterparties that you're interacting with, and that's just demanding a level of complexity that most of these actually 100, 200 persons companies were not necessarily designed for. So I think that external market pressure, where you're not going to get any more people or experience to do things, a set of tech that's less risky to try, and a group of leaders who are able to actually convince people that the company's not going to fall over if trying this new thing for a couple of weeks while they tune it is not the end state. So in my mind, that's one of the biggest things driving it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's definitely something that we've seen as well. Just building on that, Joachim, you're one of the coaches. Bill talked about coaching the organization. I think based on your experience, I'd just love to hear from you how you've seen the kind of mindset across organizations shift over the last sort of 3 to 5 years as people have become more used to, sort of taking these embracing the kind of failure that can come from some of these lower risk projects.
Well, I think what people are facing with is like sometimes you have a big change that is put down from the top of an organization. That's often hard to swallow for the people that actually do the work. But once you get to the to operators, to charterers, or to any other kind of planners, it's like, generally speaking, they're open for a conversation. How can they do better? They're crying for better tools that will help them. So, but you need to take it slow with them, and you need to spend time with them to take them on that on that journey to really to really take that along. But they will embrace it, and that's what I noticed in 2010 as well. They would embrace changes that that are small, but that will help them. Um, right now, I would say it's like this. Like Bill already mentioned, there's a lot of buzz about AI, and that's gonna do an awful lot for them. And everybody's very eager to try that, but I haven't really seen a massive, a real process change based on AI yet, since it's still a little bit of a gamble what comes out of it. It helps you in experimenting and quicker building the applications, but it's like it doesn't know what the objective is of a shipping company. It's like our goal is to increase the time charter equivalence. Like, well, an AI algorithm doesn't know. So the steps from really spending time with people is so important in onboarding new systems, in getting people ready to use it. But I deeply believe that they're not unwilling. They're probably not well educated on what this is going to do for them, how it's going to impact their work. So that information is so essential, and then you will get them on board.
Lars, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that because particularly the kind of education process of effectively kind of what's possible, but then also you've got to unwind a process that exists and then look to build a new process that doesn't yet exist. How does that actually work within Unitankers?
From our experience, so Håkan also mentioned, it's really about sitting down and talk with the guys. One of my favorite examples is one of our charting managers complaining about he wants more time with his customers, right? But due to regulations, reporting, all that kind of stuff, he don't have time. He's like 80% admin, 20% charter, right? I say, okay, how can we work this around it? But there's nothing to do because, this is what we need to do. Yes, but the way you're doing it, we can actually do a lot with. And then you need to take the time to sit down and discuss what are you actually doing, because that's actually hard for them to tell. What are you doing? Because until we know that, we cannot really like design a new process or re-engineer what they do. But when they overcome that and understand that, okay, if we actually can sit down and try just to draw the broader lines on what we are doing, then we can do something else for them, and that has been very, very effective, because they're always trying to, yeah, of course, Bill, you mentioned failing. I'm really trying to avoid that because I'm really just trying to say learning, because all our guys, especially all the seniors, they are looking for failure, so to say. Yeah, I told you we couldn't do anything about it. And no, we just learned that was just not the right way around it, or maybe there was a part you didn't tell me until it failed. So really like trying to do those small learning loops. And then it's really about sticking with them. When we introduce even small process changes or new systems, don't leave them. Because
that's huge.
They really forget. They are like lovable goldfishes. They have forgotten everything about the new process when they come into the office the day after. And you really have to remind them. You need to be patient and stick with them and follow up, because they are also very, very eager and really want success. So they don't really like to show the dirty underwear, or that this change can actually be hard to understand, and it's a new system and it's new to me. All those things, like just be cool about it and say it's totally fine. It's new for everyone, but let's just like accept that and then adopt and overcome. It's really important. We have tried it several times. We can do it ourselves, for instance, with our CRM, and we can just see like half a year and no one was really using it. And every time we asked, yeah, we're using it a lot, but there have been no records. Yeah, but we are using it. It gives us so much value. Guys, we can see it doesn't, but just tell us about what is the struggle here. Go down to the root cause. But it takes time, and then you need the success stories. Now we had a few home runs here at Unitankers, and it's just much easier because then it like transmit to the other departments. Okay, this worked for the charting guys, so we can actually change. That goes to operation, that goes to the technical department, that goes to the vetting department. So you need a little success, and that's where especially the small proof of concepts, they can be valuable to speed up these things. And yeah.
I like learning loop. I'm going to borrow that learning loop as a good. Don't know if I'll call them goldfish, but
just a lovable in front of it, Bill.
Yeah.
More acceptable.
Yeah.
Bill, talk me through your experience of those learning loops, because obviously you've done a lot of rollouts.
I was actually just thinking a bit. we have this saying when we're going live with customers, nobody has paid attention to anything we've trained or briefed on until the moment they use it. They're all, and in fact, we do much less training in advance now. We do much more socialization about why we're executing this change, like what outcome the company wants to achieve in doing it. But the actual showing them how to do it, it really only matters when the rubber meets the road in that moment. It's especially hard in email because it's like trying to teach somebody, hey, you're going to breathe differently. And they don't even though they want to learn how to use it, they're like, yeah, I know how to do email. I've been doing it for 30 years or 10 years or whatever it is. So I think that closeness to the problem, and you're right, Lars, failure is the wrong word, and it's a risky word to use in shipping, but that there is a kind of here's a pattern of how people adopted a new way of working, and you can too. What I can tell you, and at Sedna we measure a lot. The initial reactions can be extremely negative. Like you want to we see the surveys and the data coming in. But almost to a T. In fact, we almost only ever lose customers in the first 6 months. And usually after those first 6 months, some of the biggest detractors become the cheerleaders for the system. And it's usually, and I think this builds a bit on what Lars was saying, because we've solved actually what was a really ugly problem for them. That CRM one is such a great one. The millions that I've seen companies waste on CRM. And then we can kind of say, hey, in a taxi, you can look in Sedna and see if there is any problem in real time before you get in front of that customer. That's kind of a moment where they can kind of breathe easier. But it is very much, I think, the success stories. Also, they're a bit jealous of each other if someone else has figured it out. That can be very useful in a shipping company. And I see a few questions coming in, which I think we'll talk, which touch on this too.
Yeah, I keep your questions coming in. It's great to see them. We're going to come to them in the next few minutes. But before we do, Stephen, we've talked a lot about kind of listening to the users and taking a very iterative approach and fast learning loops. But also sometimes there are major transformation efforts that come from leadership that have a multi-year timeline to them. And I know that you've been on a sort of similar sort of journey over the last few years. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of when you're making this kind of much bigger wholesale change, actually how you go about it.
Well, our journey started like 5 years ago, and I think we're still a family-owned company, and our owners have a clear ambition that they want to grow the fleet, and for a very long time the focus has been let's grow the business in operations and commercial efforts to grow the fleet and grow the business. And the background was always, well, let's add a couple more people, solve the immediate issue, and go on with life. But if you double the amount of people in the back office, you quadruple the complexity. So at some point that will not work anymore, and then you have to really start looking into the processes. And like Lars and Joachim also mentioned, you have to start talking to the people what is needed in their daily life, what's the core process. And in our case, that has resulted in a very big journey. We started off with implementing a data platform, initially data warehouse, starting very minor with just a couple of our core systems, which was mainly our technical system and operational system that has spread out even now connection to class and other external parties. Thereafter an ERP for our finance department mainly. And now we have a very good understanding on what we need on our data platform, now migrating to Fabric with better data definitions and data contracts and entities. And that is like a growing understanding, which you cannot do overnight. It takes time. You have to make your failures, as we discussed, and also your lessons about it. And I think we clearly underestimated the time required from the company and the employees to digest this change. We have many people in the office that have been working for S&T for 25, 30 years, so they're a bit close to retirement or going the direction, and to bring them along in this journey is a big effort. I think you have the new generation will be natively switching over, and then they might say, even what is this for old system? they're eager to jump over, but you have to bring everybody on board. I think that is key, and it's not only management but also people doing the actual work. And like Jochem and Lars said, sit side by side and do the heavy lifting.
And Stephen, do you mind if I ask on that like transition with the people with more experience? What was there a convincing? What do you think that any preparation in advance could have avoided that, or was it simply a moment that you had to move through? By the way, we find some of these more experienced employees can become the biggest fans once we get them. But I'm curious, like as you went through that, did you think, oh, if we come at this in a different way, we might have moved faster, or is it simply what it is?
Well, I think in our case, one of the challenges that we had is that the workload from the existing processes was such a heavy for the users. I think freeing up key users early in the process, even by hiring temporary staff to backfill them, bring them into the project early, so you can really use their knowledge and use their experience, and they will be the champions already during the project, maybe.
Right.
That could have avoided some mistakes that we made in the past, and that is not the way we want to move forward. So I think it's key that you have the organizational mindset slowly, that you have data stewards, you have key users, and sometimes it sounds very fancy, but it's like not just a role within a department that helps the other users with the initial first line of support, have an understanding of the processes, and be part of these small incremental changes. Because I think, like I said in the introduction, the big bangs are really heavy for a company to digest. That is not easy. And also in the form of training, we had a full training cycle, like you mentioned as well, Bill, before I go live. But then people are still working in the old system, so they can only absorb half the eye. And then you need to do a second and a third retraining to put the full eye in and the dots on the eye to make it more efficient. And that takes time.
How counterintuitive too to think that you have to increase headcount and capacity to work the old way in order to create the space for the new way too. Thanks for sharing that. Sorry, Nick, I didn't mean to jump in there.
I'm just curious, Lars, what's your take on that?
I totally agree with Stephen. You have to overcome that burden of additional frustration with your stakeholders, and of course, when we did our digital strategy, there was a lot of hype about it, and it's a fairy tale coming, saving all of us, right? And then we enter this peak, and now we start doing changes, and then everyone just comes skeptic, and it really starts storming around all our guys. And then at that point, you really need to sit down and then actually get on board and try to understand and be honest about the changes you're doing. And yes, we will do these changes, and it will not work 100% day one. It will maybe be a 60% solution, but we know it has the capacity to move us. But we need you to take us the last percentage to reach the goal. So you really have to get into their shoes and stick with them. And then at a certain point, when they see that they actually are the keys to winning, then they actually start really to become the advocates for the changes, because they feel like superheroes all of a sudden. Like they have the keys to success, and they really like winning. So as Bill mentioned, so
they like winning.
Yeah, and then they get all kind of ideas, and that's actually quite fun to say, okay, settle down now. Let's just start fixing what was actually the purpose here before we start dreaming once again.
Jakob said that the TCE, which they're trying to improve, and he was touching on the AI, and I build on what Lars said just now, that it's even worse because AI is a backward-looking technology, right? It's only looking at the historical base case, and so it's actually quite dangerous to think about it from a commercial outcomes case yet. But one of the points that I really think about, at least the way we view the market, and I think it bleeds a little bit into what Stephen and Lars are saying, shipping people know how to do their job. Our job is to create the space for them to do the things that they are, by habit and experience, naturally good at. Sniffing out a new opportunity, solving a problem, getting the ship out faster. It is the systems and the data that conspire, and their need to feel they have to go through it all to not actually miss something, that is stopping them from actually making the company more money. You don't need AI to make the company more money. You simply need to free up time for the people who already are working inside the company, often, as these guys point out, with a lot of experience.
Just building on that, Joachim, once this is in place and the foundations are sort of fixed, like Lars says, what do you see as the sort of paint me a picture of what becomes possible? Bill's talking about freeing up time there so people can go away and make more money. But if you were to wind 5 years ahead from this point of really strong foundations, what becomes possible in a shipping organization?
Well, I think the first thing that people dream of what becomes possible is better reporting, but that's not what makes you excited for 5 years from now. It's like getting better reports out. It's like that's very handy, but that's what the data warehouse does and the integration does. But if you really start looking ahead, you start looking at planning your futures. Like how can the plan that I have, how can I improve that? What opportunities are there so that I can optimize, well, ultimately in a shipping company, the time charter equivalent of the average of the fleet, not just of one good deal, but it's like the average. How can you lift the average planner, the average charter to a higher level? You're not going to improve the best charter. It's like those guys are brilliant. You're not going to improve the super experienced operator that knows everything about every port, every lost cargo, every this, that, or the other thing. You're not going to improve that. You're never going to meet that. But you can lift the average performing charter, or increase the onboarding of the new guys. It's like, and give them the tools that really help them. But if you really looking at a concrete example, I think fleet planning is like how are you going to plan your fleet, say 180 days ahead? What are your expected earnings on that? How does what cargoes do you need to make that happen? Where does what ship need to be to make that happening? So all that positioning at points in the future to really help you to make that happen. Of course, history has a lot of valuable in data for that. It's like machine learning will help you to start understanding the relationships between that, and that's why you definitely need the data foundation and need to have that accurately recorded. But for planning the future, it also involves a lot of assumptions. So I would say you need good models to that operating models that yeah, I don't like the term a digital twin, but in a way creates a template of what your common view as an organization of the future is. And every change that you want to make, how can you test that and how will that play out? So that needs to calculate it. If you continuously need to calculate what does this mean for my future, and I would say that's really the big thing that you can get out of it. It's like being more agile in your commercial decision making and your operational decision making for the days ahead, for the weeks ahead, but also for the months ahead that you can optimize that.
So really, statistically speaking, if you've got 100 people in an organization, 50 will be below average. And actually thinking of it in terms of how you raise the average, I think is a really interesting way to look at it, rather than trying to give people superpowers. We
actually
are
raising the rate average is a tough term. What it is showing people what great looks like. like what a great answer is, what a great solution to this problem is, how we could solve. Because a lot of what happens in our industry, and I like Joachim connecting it to TCE, is folks inside these companies are trying to find how they solve this in the best way before, right? Because most likely they've seen this template problem. And so if you can accelerate how quickly they can arrive at the truth or the answer, then you will see a better overall performance. It's not even less about the guys being average and more about where do they go to get the data.
Yeah.
Anyways,
sticking with you, Bill, there's a question here from the audience. What would it take to what would it actually take to wean shipping operations off email dependency, given that it's deeply embedded across chartering operations and post-fixture teams?
I saw that. I drop me a line on LinkedIn, please. The person who put that question. The very first thing is to not tell people you're going to make them come off email. And that is because that is just far too frightening a concept to them. And it's actually not possible because the conversation and the solutioning is happening in there. So our approach, and it's coming to our strategies getting played out more publicly now as we make different acquisitions and stuff in the market. But hey, okay, if all of this is an email now, let's get rid of the duplicates first. Okay, let's figure out what voyage it is or what pre-trade it is. That's good too. Okay, is there one piece of data which we can be absolutely certain we can pull out in a consistent way, push it back into your voyage management system, or your purchasing is a very good example. We have a customer up in Norway where all the POs and there are metadata inside the POs associated with different things that are being purchased. We can, in a very accurate way, link all the emails around those purchase orders. That's the beginning of building that credibility that you can wean people off. Now, I do think that the latest generation of LLMs are extraordinarily good at extracting the data after that, but people will still want to make sure they're not missing any part of the conversation in there. But for what it's worth, you cannot change or remove something without measuring it first. And so the most important thing, and obviously we have a biased view of it, is getting a handle on your email, converting it into data first is the approach, and not scaring them that it's going to go away. Yeah.
Lars and Stephen, I'll send this to both of you if I may. This is a really fascinating question. AI is positioned as the next competitive advantage in shipping, but if our data foundations are fragmented, scattered across emails, spreadsheets, and other systems, are we building intelligence or just accelerating inconsistency? At what point does governance need to precede innovation? And to put a little bit more color on that, we did a report back in August, I think it was. We found something like 80% of organizations are experimenting with AI. Only 11%, I think it was, had any kind of policies in place on how it will be used. Lars, how are you handling that?
Actually, I agree. We have the terms of AI has actually come over a lot of our guys now because we've done the system replacement and talked about this. This should be an enabler for AI. And now they are starting working with Copilot and ChatGPT and other solutions we have here in-house to build small agents. And they just start building. And that's actually, as you mentioned, that's just uncertainty. And, we don't know what you're actually getting answers on here. So we're trying to hold people back a little. We have established a data strategy and a governance playbook, mainly to help our data guys saying, okay, these kind of data is vetted or approved by into our Fabric data lake. And by there, we say, this is the truth, and you can work with that data around AI. And that's one step. But it's really hard to control the guys because now they are eager. We have set fire to them. We have put a lot of fuel the last year, and now it's just basically exploding in between our hands and trying to control it, right? But what we want to do is like building use cases because they believe that building an AI agent is free. They are not from IT. So they don't see it cost a lot of tokens and do use a lot of consumptions. So for them, it's like free for them to ask those questions. We say, okay, nothing is free here in the world. So we are trying to make them understand that we need a use case, and then we will actually have to step back, and that's where they don't really like it because when you try to do things in a governed way, it usually goes a little slower but also up in the quality, hopefully. So we try to pull them a little back and say, okay, before you go further now, I like your idea. Now start building the use cases. What kind of data do you need? How can we prove it's true? And then we'll have we have a few guys specializing in building AI agents, for instance, making them doing POCs on this together with the teams.
We run an IT cost benchmarking program at Thetius, and one of the most amazing things we get out of it is how often end users across the organization think that IT is effectively a kind of free resource. But I hadn't heard that parallel to AI and kind of consumption of tokens. So it's really interesting to hear that sort of developing. And Stephen, what about within SMT?
Well, we are experimenting with it. I think, like the most obvious one, because it's in your ecosystem, is Copilot. But I think, Microsoft is behind the curve clearly at this point in time. So you have to start looking to external sources. Actually, this is it's not in the operations realm, but I've developed a financial planning solution, completely with the help of AI, because where AI is leading now is coding, actually. The speeding up development time, that's where you can see the big disruption going clearly. But on the question of AI making mistakes, yes, you need to make your data entities and data warehouse in order, have your integrations working correctly, and know which system is your single point of truth, or at least the leading system in your data, and then you can start leveraging it. But putting an AI on unstructured data will be a very risky. Yeah.
I like that scales error. That's going to be something I'll borrow from in the future. I will say though, and not to be, I'm always the optimist. Our assumptions here too, they could be wrong. There are things that the most recent models can do that we were absolutely convinced they couldn't do 3 months ago, and they can. And if they have the access to the correct data, my 2 cents on that, Nick, is training your people how to prompt. That is like, so either preloading your own agents with predefined prompts that are much more sector specific, like ship management or shipbuilding type prompts, but also just the general, because you can actually write prompts which will error correct for some of the risks that exist in it. And by the way, I've been blunt about it online. You shouldn't be using Copilot. It's just not good enough for this experimentation, and it actually damages confidence in people using the tech in this phase. I'm sure Microsoft will fix it, by the way.
They are making improvements on MCP server level now, where they try to combine their multiple solutions into one platform. but still, actually, even when you're trying to develop something on their platform, the other co-pilots or the other AIs is better. Which is a surprise,
Yeah. I think it actually, and when you think about it, shipping people love to build stuff, right? A lot of software came from the ships. Engineers had time on their hands. They sometimes, not anymore with internet, but lots of you guys have probably all seen it inside your company, not just Excel sheets, but some pretty sophisticated programming going on. I think you're going to see an explosion in a very positive way of innovation coming from this, assuming that your core systems have APIs that are free to access, published, and stable.
Final comment from my side, I would say we also have a lot of talks about make or buy on AI, because when we look into software and solution, we actually also have an expectation of our vendors, Sedna, for instance, that will provide us with some of these services.
Yeah.
Because we are a lean organization. We don't have developers for these things. We take out an hour here or there to try to build something. And that is the nature of our business. We are stuck in the middle, too big to be small and too small to be big, right? Yep. So we buy software which actually can help us, and then we trust them to build something that can leverage us internally.
Yeah, we're building tools for you to build your apps. Using lovable concepts like that inside the application too. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are rapidly running out of time. What I'd like to do is perhaps just as a way of wrapping up, I'd be interested if there was sort of one thing that you feel that members of the audience should take back into their organizations based on the discussion we've had today to improve the foundations that they're working from, what would that be? And Joachim, why don't you kick us off with that?
Well, I think it's really about being humble about the changes that you make. Connect the analyst close to the chartering operations technical desk. Probably even put that desk literally there to really keep that conversation going and really understand what they're doing and how you can help them with new tools, adaptive use of the tools to improve it.
Fantastic. Lars?
Yeah, I would say what seems to work the best for us is a very, very strong management buy-in on this, both financially and commitment towards pushing where pushes needs to fuel when needed. And then you need a lot of trust to the process. This is not an overnight change. It takes time. We will learn, we will fail, obviously fail, and then go a total another direction. But that's totally fine. So results doesn't show up. It takes like half a year and you can look back what actually changed. You cannot see it like week to week, or maybe sometimes you can see it month to month, but you need to see it in a wider perspective.
And Stephen?
Yeah, just continuing what Lars said, I think most people see IT as an IT project, but I think all these system solutions is more like an organizational change. It's an organizational change in the mindset, in culture, and the way people perform the process. And IT is just the tool that make it work. So it's not only about implementing the system, but really make it use for the people and optimize it.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And final word goes to you, Bill.
I think don't underestimate the small win. That I think is one of the most important things. As simple as a faster computer and IT starts delivering value. I sometimes we see people are trying to solve so many problems at once, and I think that the credibility can be built up. Okay, we're going to make this problem, and we've got consensus that we fixed it. Let's move on to the next. You have to have a vision, much like Stephen and Lars are talking about, and with management buy-in. But many small wins conspire to momentum. Yeah.
Fantastic. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think from my side, before we came live, we were just talking about how nice it is to do something that isn't AI and is real human conversation. And I think that is actually, for me, one of the major takeaways is the importance of continuous conversation and communication around this. This is major organizational change. It is not just technology change, as Stephen says. And that requires conversation between leadership setting the vision, but real empathy with end users as well. Close out those learning loops as fast as you can, find the quick wins and learn from those that don't go quite so well, and recognize that this is a long-term change. This will take years, not months or weeks, but the wins are there to be had. Thank you so much, Stephen, Lars, Joachim, and Bill, and thank you to our partners at Sedna for actually commissioning this research. The research itself will be in your inbox, so thank you for your attention today, your fascinating questions, and I hope you find the research valuable and interesting. And as always, we'll see you on our next research launch. Thank you, everyone.
Hey guys, cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.